1 year had passed since the Battle of Earth, and the galaxy would never be the same. President Helen Carter stood in what used to be the council chambers, but everything had changed. The great amphitheater was still there, but now it held representatives from dozens of species who had thrown off council rule and claimed their freedom. The age of the council's dominance was over. The age of the Galactic Assembly had begun. Helen looked around at the faces, both human and alien, gathered here. Some were familiar by now. Others were newcomers, species that had only recently joined the assembly. Each one represented a world that had chosen freedom over submission. "I call this session to order," she announced. "We have much to discuss." The first order of business was the trial of High Arbiter Vexithora and the council leadership. For thousands of years they had ruled the galaxy with absolute power. They had destroyed civilizations that didn't obey. They had enslaved entire species. They had claimed to bring order, but they had only brought fear and oppression. Admiral Lisa Harper, now serving as Earth's primary representative to the Assembly, presented the evidence. It was overwhelming. Records of species forced into servitude, planets stripped of their resources, cultures destroyed simply because they were different. 3 times in council history, they had completely sterilized inhabited worlds when the populations refused to submit. The trial lasted for weeks. Vexithora, its crystalline form now dull and lifeless, sat in silence as the evidence mounted. Other council members tried to defend their actions, claiming they had only been keeping order, preventing chaos. But the testimony from their victims told a different story. When the time came for judgment, Helen spoke for the assembly. "The council claimed to be guardians of civilization. Instead, you were tyrants. You took the gift of advanced technology and used it to enslave rather than uplift. However, this assembly believes in justice, not revenge. You will not be executed. You will not be tortured. But you will spend the rest of your lives ensuring that what you did can never happen again. You will help us build a galaxy where all beings are truly free." It was a sentence that surprised many. Some species wanted harsher punishment, but Helen and the other leaders understood something important. If they killed the council members, they would just be replacing one kind of violence with another. The new galaxy had to be better than the old one. The real work began after the trial. Building a new galactic government from scratch was harder than winning the war had been. Different species had different needs, different cultures, different ideas about how things should work. Arguments were common. Compromises were necessary. But slowly, a framework emerged. The Galactic Charter was simple but powerful. No species could claim dominance over another. All trade and cooperation had to be between equals. Military alliances were allowed for defense, but wars of conquest were forbidden. Technology and knowledge would be shared freely. Any species that violated these principles would face the combined forces of all free peoples. Dr. Amy Richardson led the Technology Sharing Initiative. She had spent the past year traveling to different worlds, teaching them what humanity had learned. The quantum drive technology that let ships travel faster, the plasma weapons that had helped win the war, Chris Palmer's quantum interference systems. All of it was offered freely to any species that wanted to learn. "Knowledge should lift everyone up," Amy explained during one assembly session. The council hoarded technology to maintain their power. "We're going to do the opposite. The more we share, the stronger we all become." Not everyone in the galaxy accepted the new order. Some species had benefited from council rule and resented the changes. Others were loyal to the old ways and saw the assembly as dangerous chaos. There were conflicts, skirmishes, even a few attempts at rebellion. But the assembly stood firm. When one species tried to conquer its neighbor, a combined fleet from 6 different worlds, including Earth, arrived to stop them. The message was clear. The age of conquest was over. Captain Jake Morrison had returned to what he loved most: exploration. His ship, the Resolution, now carried a crew that was only half human. The rest were beings from across the galaxy, all working together to discover new worlds and make peaceful contact with species that had hidden from the Council's oppressive reach. During one mission, they discovered a planet where an intelligent species had deliberately kept themselves at a primitive technology level to avoid attracting Council attention. When Jake explained that the Council was gone and they were free to develop as they wished, the aliens wept with relief. They had spent 5,000 years hiding in fear, and now they could finally be themselves. "This is why we fought. Jake told his crew as they left that world. Not for glory or conquest, but so that every species could be free to choose their own path. Commander Ryan Foster, now an instructor at Earth's new military academy, taught the next generation of defenders. But the lessons were different than they used to be. Our job isn't to conquer, he told his students. Our job is to protect, to ensure that no one ever has to face what we faced, that no species has to choose between freedom and survival. Back on Earth, people were adjusting to their new role in galactic affairs. Alien visitors walked the streets of major cities. Human children grew up learning not just about Earth's history, but about the histories of 100 different worlds. Some people struggled with the changes, others embraced them enthusiastically. But everyone understood that humanity had been fundamentally changed by contact with the greater galaxy. In a memorial park built to honor those who had died in the war, President Helen Carter stood before a wall covered in names. 37,000 humans had given their lives for freedom. Each name was engraved in stone, a permanent reminder of the cost of liberty. Ambassador Peter Grant joined her. His hair was completely white now and he looked tired, but there was satisfaction in his eyes. "Do you think it was worth it?" he asked quietly. Helen thought about the question for a long time before answering. Those people died believing that freedom matters more than safety. That being able to choose your own future is worth any price. Looking at what we've built, at all the species now living free lives because we showed them it was possible, yes, it was worth it. But we can never forget what it cost. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still problems to solve, still species that struggled to adapt to freedom after so long under council control. The Assembly had to deal with trade disputes, border disagreements, and the occasional bad actor who thought they could take advantage of the new order. But it was better. Worlds that had been stripped of resources were being helped to rebuild. Species that had been enslaved were learning to govern themselves. Technology and culture flowed freely between worlds. The galaxy was becoming a place of cooperation rather than domination. Dr. Chris Palmer, now leading the Assembly's research division, made discovery after discovery by combining human innovation with alien knowledge. They developed medical treatments that saved billions of lives. They created new energy sources that eliminated poverty on dozens of worlds. They even began to unlock the secrets of the ancient civilization that had originally created the technology the Council had used, finding wonders that neither humans nor Council members had imagined. 5 years after the war ended, a new species made contact with the Assembly. They were from a distant part of the galaxy and had been considering attacking what they thought was a weak collection of primitive worlds. But when they learned about humanity's war against the Council, about how a single planet had inspired a galactic revolution, they changed their plans. Instead of invading, they asked to join. "Your species interests us," their leader told Helen during the first meeting. "You were given a choice between comfortable slavery and dangerous freedom. You chose freedom. That takes a kind of courage we respect." "Freedom isn't just for humans," Helen replied. "It's for everyone. That's what we're building here. A galaxy where every being, no matter how strong or weak, has the right to determine their own destiny." At a ceremony marking the 10th anniversary of the Battle of Earth, Admiral Lisa Harper gave a speech to the Assembly. She was older now, with gray in her hair and lines on her face, but her voice was still strong. 10 years ago, Earth declared war on an empire that had ruled for 3,000 years. We didn't do it because we wanted to fight. We did it because we refused to be prisoners. Today, 17 species that were once slaves are now free. 32 more have chosen to join our Assembly as equals. We've prevented 4 wars and stopped 2 attempts at conquest. We've shared our knowledge and learned from others. We've built something that our ancestors only dreamed of. A galaxy where freedom is the rule, not the exception. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. But we can never become complacent. Freedom requires constant vigilance. It requires the courage to stand up to those who would take it away. It requires the wisdom to share it with others. And it requires the humility to remember that we're not perfect, that we make mistakes, and that we must always strive to do better. The Council fell because they forgot these truths. We must never forget them. Captain Jake Morrison, watching the speech from his ship as it explored the far reaches of the galaxy, smiled. High Arbiter Vexithora stood in the Council's war room, its crystalline form pulsing with colors that reflected its rage. The holographic display showed the ruins of Sentinel Prime, and the reports coming in were all the same. Defeat. Humiliation. The impossible had happened. Humans, the primitive species that should have been cowering in fear, had struck first and won. "How many ships do we have available?" Vexithora demanded. The military coordinator, a being that looked like a floating collection of metal spheres, consulted its data. "We can assemble 500 warships within 2 weeks. They will converge on Earth and eliminate the human threat permanently." 500 should be more than enough," Vexithora said with satisfaction. "I will personally command this fleet. The galaxy needs to see that attacking the Council brings only destruction. We will make an example of Earth that will be remembered for 10,000 years." Throughout Council space, the Great War Machine began to move. Ships were pulled from patrol routes across the galaxy. Crews were assembled. Weapons were loaded. The Council had not mobilized like this in centuries, but when they did, it was with overwhelming force. They did not believe in fair fights. They believed in crushing their enemies so completely that no one else would dare to resist. On Earth, President Helen Carter watched the reports with growing concern. Intelligence had detected the Council fleet assembling. The numbers were terrifying. 500 ships, each one more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. "Can we win against those odds?" General Marcus Webb pulled up tactical displays. "If we fight them in open space, ship to ship? No, we'd be wiped out in hours. But we're not going to fight them in open space. We're going to fight them here in our home system where we have every advantage." Admiral Lisa Harper explained the plan. "Over the past 5 years, we've turned the solar system into the biggest trap in human history. Every asteroid larger than a car has been hollowed out and fitted with weapons. Every moon has hidden missile batteries. We've seeded the entire approach route with mines, sensors, and automated defense platforms. And the Council doesn't know any of this because they think we're too primitive to build such things." Dr. Amy Richardson added her perspective. "The Council fleet will follow standard doctrine. They'll approach in formation, maximizing their combined firepower. It's served them well for thousands of years because everyone they've fought has used similar tactics. But we're going to break their formation apart before they even reach Earth." Chris Palmer showed them his latest work. "I've upgraded the disruption system. When the Council fleet enters the outer solar system, we'll hit them with interference patterns that will scramble their navigation. They'll think they're on course, but they'll actually be drifting off target. By the time they realize it, their perfect formation will be scattered across millions of kilometers." 3 days later, the Council fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system. High Arbiter Vexithora stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Judgment, feeling confident. 500 ships against one planet. The humans had gotten lucky at Sentinel Prime, but luck would not save them now. "Begin the approach," Vexithora commanded. "Standard battle formation. When we reach Earth, I want orbital bombardment to commence immediately. Target their cities first." The fleet moved forward in perfect order, a wall of metal and energy weapons that stretched across space. It was beautiful in its precision, the result of thousands of years of military tradition. Every captain knew their position. Every weapons officer knew their target. It was the kind of coordinated assault that had broken the resistance of 100 worlds. Then they crossed into the outer solar system, passing Neptune's orbit, and everything started to go wrong. Navigation systems began reporting conflicting data. Sensors showed phantom readings. Ships started drifting off course, just slightly at first, but enough to disrupt the tight formation. Captains tried to correct, but their instruments were lying to them. Within an hour, the perfect formation had become scattered and disorganized. "What is happening?" Vexithora demanded. "Why are we not maintaining formation?" Before anyone could answer, the first wave of attacks hit. Asteroids that had seemed inert suddenly came alive with weapons fire. Railguns launched solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. Missiles erupted from hidden launch bays. All around the fleet, human weapons struck from every direction at once. The Council ship's shields held, but barely. These attacks weren't meant to destroy the fleet. They were meant to slow it down, to spread it out, to create chaos. And they were working perfectly. "Deploy fighters," Vexithora ordered. "Clear out these weapon platforms." But as Council fighters launched, they found themselves facing something unexpected. The weapons platforms weren't stationary. They were mobile, moving and dodging, making themselves difficult targets. And when fighters got close, the platforms had surprise defenses built in, from point defense lasers to explosive charges that could take out entire squadrons. The Council fleet pressed on, but it was bleeding ships with every kilometer. 5 ships disabled here, 10 more there. Death by 1,000 cuts, and they hadn't even reached the inner solar system yet. At Jupiter, Strike Fleet Beta emerged from hiding in the planet's upper atmosphere. They hit the Council's left flank hard, focusing their fire on ships that had been separated from the main group. Then, before the Council could respond effectively, the human ships disappeared back into Jupiter's storms, which interfered with Council sensors. The same tactic repeated at Saturn. Strike Fleet Gamma appeared, struck, and vanished. The Council captains were experienced warriors, but they had never fought an enemy like this. An enemy that refused to stand and fight, that struck from hiding and ran away, that turned the entire battlefield into a maze of traps and ambushes. High Arbiter Vex Thora watched its fleet falling apart and felt something it had not experienced in its long life. Fear. Send word to all ships. Abandon formation. Full speed to Earth. We will end this quickly. It was exactly what the humans wanted them to do. As the Council fleet broke formation and raced toward Earth, they were moving faster and less carefully. They stopped coordinating their shields. They stopped watching their flanks. They just wanted to reach Earth and finish this nightmare. That's when they entered the final trap. Mars' orbit was filled with what appeared to be space debris and dead satellites. But as the Council fleet passed through, that debris came alive. Thousands of proximity mines detonated. Not enough to destroy ships, but enough to damage them. Automated missile platforms that had seemed like old human satellites opened up and fired everything they had. And then the human fleets struck. Strike Fleet Alpha from one side, Strike Fleet Beta from another, Strike Fleet Gamma from a third direction, and Strike Fleet Delta, which had been hidden beyond Neptune this entire time, came in from behind. The Council fleet found itself surrounded, damaged, disorganized, and under attack from all sides. But they still had one chance. Earth itself was just ahead. If they could reach the planet and threaten to destroy it, the humans would have to surrender. High Arbiter Vexus Thora ordered all remaining ships to make a final push toward Earth. That's when Chris Palmer activated his masterpiece. The universal override code that he had hidden in the Council's own systems finally triggered. For 5 critical minutes, every Council ship simultaneously lost communications, sensors, and targeting systems. They were deaf, blind, and helpless in the middle of a battle. 5 minutes doesn't sound like much time, but in combat, it's an eternity. Human ships closed in, their targeting computers working perfectly. They focused fire on engines and weapon systems, crippling Council ships without destroying them. The goal wasn't to kill everyone. The goal was to win. Captain Jake Morrison, commanding the Resolution, found himself facing the Eternal Judgment, Vexithora's flagship. It was the largest ship in the Council fleet, covered in weapons and protected by shields that should have been impenetrable. Should have been. Target their shield generators, Jake ordered. Full power. All weapons. The Resolution's weapons, designed by the brightest minds on Earth specifically for this moment, fired. The plasma bolt struck the shields in a carefully calculated pattern. Amy had discovered that if you hit Council shields in the right sequence at the right frequencies, you could create a cascade failure. It required precise timing and perfect accuracy, but humans were very good at both of those things. The Eternal Judgment's shields flickered, wavered, and collapsed. Before they could regenerate, the Resolution fired again, this time at the engines and weapon systems. Explosions bloomed across the great ship's hull. It wasn't destroyed, but it was crippled, floating helplessly in space. Open a channel, Jake commanded. All frequencies. When the channel opened, he spoke directly to the High Arbiter. Vexthora, this is Captain Jake Morrison. Your fleet is defeated. Your flagship is disabled. You came here to make an example of Earth. Instead, the galaxy is watching you lose to the species you called primitive. Surrender now, and we will treat your people with mercy and dignity. Continue fighting, and we will destroy every ship you have. The choice is yours. Inside the Eternal Judgment, Vexithora looked at the tactical display. Half the fleet was destroyed or disabled. The other half was scattered and leaderless. The bridge of the ESS Resolution was quiet except for the steady beep of sensors and the soft hum of the engines. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center, watching the main view screen with intense focus. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with the calm efficiency that came from months of training. But Jake could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Status report, he said quietly. Lieutenant Kevin Barnes, the tactical officer, checked his instruments. All weapon systems are green. Shields are at full power. Disruption package is loaded and ready to deploy. Navigation? Jake asked. Quantum drive is charged and standing by, reported pilot Nancy Cooper. We can jump on your command, Captain. Jake took a deep breath. Through the view screen, he could see the other ships of Strike Fleet Alpha holding position. 70 ships in total, hidden behind one of Saturn's moons, waiting for the order to attack. Similar fleets were positioned throughout the solar system. Strike Fleet Beta near Jupiter, Strike Fleet Gamma in the asteroid belt, and Strike Fleet Delta beyond Neptune, ready to spring the trap. Their target was Sentinel Prime, the Council's military outpost that monitored this sector of space. It was a massive station with its own defense fleet, and it was considered absolutely impregnable. The Council had stations like this scattered throughout the galaxy, each one serving as a reminder of their power. No one had ever successfully attacked one. Today that was going to change. Captain receiving transmission from Earth, said Communications Officer Steve Palmer. It's the President. Helen Carter's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but determined. Captains of Strike Fleet Alpha, this is it. Once you begin the attack, there's no going back. The entire galaxy will know that humanity has chosen war over submission. I won't lie to you. Many of you won't come home. But what you're about to do will echo through history forever. You're not just fighting for Earth. You're fighting for every species that's ever been told they're not good enough, not advanced enough, not worthy of freedom. Make them remember us. Make them regret underestimating humanity. And most importantly, come home safe. Good luck. And may God be with you all. The transmission ended. Jake looked around at his crew. Some were young, barely out of training. Others were veterans who had served in Earth's old military forces. All of them had volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. You heard the President. This is our chance to show the galaxy what humans are made of. All ships prepare to jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute. Space twisted and bent as 70 human ships jumped simultaneously. One moment they were hiding behind Saturn. The next moment they appeared in a sphere formation around Sentinel Prime. The Council Station's defenses immediately began to react, but they were already too late. Chris, activate the disruption package now, Jake ordered. Chris Palmer, working from a specialized station on the bridge, entered the activation codes. The skeleton key that he had spent years developing launched from every ship in the fleet simultaneously. It was a quantum signal that piggybacked on the Council's own communication networks, spreading faster than their systems could detect or block it. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the Council Station and its defense fleet, systems began to malfunction. Communications dissolved into static. Sensors started reporting false readings and ghost images. Targeting computers couldn't lock onto the human ships. The carefully coordinated defense that the Council relied on fell apart into chaos and confusion. All ships weapons free, Jake commanded. Target their shield generators first, fire. The Resolution's plasma cannons came alive, firing bright blue bolts of energy at the station. These weren't like the old kinetic weapons or missiles that humanity had used before. These were new weapons designed by Amy's team specifically to exploit weaknesses in Council shield technology. Instead of trying to overpower the shields with brute force, they attacked the frequency harmonics that kept the shields stable. The first volley struck Sentinel Prime's shields. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then cracks of lightning began to spread across the shield surface. The energy feedback loops that Amy had predicted started to cascade through the system. Sections of the shield began to flicker and fail. The Council's defense fleet tried to respond, but they were fighting blind and deaf. Their ships were designed for organized combat where both sides could see each other clearly and communicate effectively. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that appeared and disappeared from their sensors, whose movements seemed random and unpredictable, and whose weapons struck from unexpected angles. Commander Ryan Foster led a squadron of 20 smaller ships, what Earth called fighters, though they were each the size of an old aircraft carrier. His voice came through on the fleet channel, excitement barely controlled. Strike Wing 1 moving to attack. These Council ships are huge, but they can't hit what they can't see. Breaking into attack pattern Delta. Jake watched as Ryan's fighters swarmed around a Council cruiser like angry bees around a bear. The Council ship was 10 times their size and had 100 times their firepower. But it couldn't bring that firepower to bear. Its weapons were designed for long-range combat against targets that would politely stay still and fight according to established rules. The human fighters stayed close, too close for the big weapons to track, darting in to strike at engines and weapon emplacements before dancing away. "Captain, incoming transmission from Sentinel Prime," Steve reported. "They're trying to surrender." "Not yet," Jake replied coldly. "We need to make sure the entire galaxy sees this. Keep recording everything and broadcasting it on all frequencies. Let every species under Council rule watch what's happening here." The battle continued for 4 hours. It wasn't a fair fight, and the humans knew it. They had every advantage: surprise, superior tactics, and technology designed specifically to counter Council defenses. The Council forces fought bravely, but bravery without coordination is just chaos. One by one, their ships were disabled or destroyed. Sentinel Prime's shields finally collapsed entirely, leaving the station defenseless. Finally, Jake gave the order: "Ceasefire. All ships hold position." The sudden silence was deafening. Where moments before the space around Sentinel Prime had been filled with weapons fire and exploding ships, now there was only wreckage and the drifting hulks of disabled vessels. "Open a channel to Sentinel Prime," Jake ordered. "All frequencies maximum broadcast." Steve worked his controls. "Channel open, Captain." "We're broadcasting to the entire sector." Jake took a breath, then spoke. His words would be heard on thousands of worlds by billions of beings. "Attention, Sentinel Prime and all Council forces. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Resolution. 5 years ago, your Council summoned us to their chambers. They judged us unworthy of freedom. They demanded we surrender our rights and submit to their authority. They threatened to destroy us if we refused. Today, Earth gives its answer. We refuse. We will not be caged. We will not surrender our freedom. And we will not bow to anyone." He paused, letting his words sink in. "To all species listening to this broadcast, know that the Council's power is not absolute. They can be challenged. They can be defeated. Freedom is possible. To the Council leadership, know that this is just the beginning. We're coming for you. And to the people of Sentinel Prime who are still alive, you have one chance to surrender. Take it." Within minutes, the surrender came. The Council forces that remained laid down their weapons. Human Marines trained for months in boarding operations secured the station. They found thousands of Council personnel, many species that humans had never seen before, all shocked that their mighty fortress had fallen to these primitive newcomers. Admiral Lisa Harper's voice came through from her command ship, the ESS Valiant. "Excellent work, Strike Fleet Alpha. Hold position and secure the station. Strike Fleets Beta and Gamma are moving to intercept Council reinforcements. Fleet Delta remains in position for the next phase." Jake allowed himself a small smile. The first strike had been a complete success. But he knew this was just the opening move in a much larger game. The Council would be stunned, outraged, and terrified. They would send everything they had to crush this rebellion before it could spread. That was exactly what humanity was counting on. "Captain, we're receiving messages from all over the galaxy," Steve reported, his voice filled with wonder. "Dozens of species are sending us communications. Some are threats from Council loyalists, but others are messages of support. One species is saying they're inspired by what we did. Another is asking how they can help." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This was what they had hoped for but hadn't dared to believe would actually happen. The Council's iron grip on the galaxy was based on fear and the belief that resistance was impossible. By proving that the Council could be beaten, humanity had planted a seed of hope that could grow into revolution. "Record all of those messages," Jake ordered. "Earth needs to see them. And send a response to anyone who asks for help. Tell them to wait and watch. Tell them that humanity is about to show them that freedom is worth fighting for." Chris looked up from his station, a huge grin on his face. "Captain, I'm intercepting Council communications. They're in complete panic." The emergency meeting room beneath the United Earth Government building was packed with people. President Helen Carter sat at the head of the long table, her face showing the strain of 3 sleepless nights. Around her sat military leaders, scientists, diplomats, and representatives from every major nation on Earth. The video from the Council chambers had been played and replayed dozens of times. Everyone knew what was at stake. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said General Marcus Webb, his weathered face set in a deep frown. "They want us to give up space travel, destroy our weapons, and let them inspect us whenever they feel like it. And if we refuse, they'll bomb us back to the Stone Age." "That's the situation," Peter confirmed. He had barely slept since returning from the Council station. They made it very clear that this isn't a negotiation. It's an ultimatum. Helen rubbed her temples, fighting off another headache. How long do we have? 10 years to comply fully, Jake answered. But based on their statements, I expect inspection teams within 5 years. They'll want to verify that we're making progress. Dr. Amy Richardson, a brilliant physicist in her early 40s, leaned forward. She had been reviewing data from the Defiance's sensors during the entire council visit. President Carter, I've been analyzing their technology. It's advanced, no question about that. But it's not magic. Everything they have follows physical laws that we understand. We're behind them, but not impossibly so. How far behind? Marcus asked. Amy pulled up a holographic display showing various technological comparisons. In some areas, centuries. Their energy shields, their faster-than-light engines, their weapon systems, all of these are far more advanced than ours. But here's the interesting part. In the past 50 years, humanity has been advancing faster than any species in recorded council history. We went from the first airplane to landing on the moon in just 66 years. The fastest any council species managed that same progression was 300 years. What are you saying? Helen asked, a spark of hope in her voice. I'm saying that humans are very good at catching up when we're motivated, Amy replied. And right now we have all the motivation we need. I've been part of a secret research project for the past decade. We've been studying artifacts recovered from various incidents that the public doesn't know about. Crashed probes, abandoned technology, things like that. We've made progress, but we've been working slowly, carefully. If we put all our resources into it, if we stop worrying about keeping secrets and start focusing on results, we could advance decades in just a few years. Commander Lisa Harper, who had been promoted to admiral after the council meeting, spoke up. Even if we could match their technology, they have thousands of worlds. Billions, maybe trillions of beings. We're one planet with 8 billion people. The numbers alone make it impossible. Not if we don't fight the war they expect, said a new voice. Everyone turned to look at Chris Palmer, a young engineer in his late 20s who had been invited to the meeting at Amy's insistence. He looked nervous speaking in front of so many important people, but his voice grew stronger as he continued. I've been studying the sensor data from the council station. Their ships all use similar designs. Their communications all run on the same networks. Their entire civilization is built on standardized technology that hasn't changed much in thousands of years. So, Marcus asked, not unkindly. So they're complacent, Chris explained. They've been the dominant power for so long that they've stopped innovating. Everything is built on top of old systems that were designed by whoever came before them. And old systems have vulnerabilities, backdoors, weaknesses that the original designers put in either intentionally or accidentally. Helen's eyes narrowed. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Chris nodded, gaining confidence. Give me access to the data we collected, and I think I can find a way to disrupt their systems. Maybe not control them, but definitely interfere with them. Imagine if during a battle their ships couldn't communicate with each other. If their sensors stopped working properly. If their weapons couldn't target accurately. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Helen spoke. Let me ask the question that everyone is thinking. Can we actually win a war against the Galactic Council? No, Marcus said bluntly. Not if we fight a conventional war. They'd crush us. But we don't fight conventional wars, Jake interjected. Throughout human history, when a smaller force faces a larger one, the smaller force has to use tactics the enemy doesn't expect. Guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run attacks, psychological operations. We can't beat them in a straight fight, but we might be able to make them regret starting the fight in the first place. You're talking about actually declaring war on them, Peter said, his diplomat's instincts horrified at the idea. Do you understand what that means? How many people could die? I understand, Jake replied quietly. But what's the alternative? We become prisoners in our own solar system? We destroy everything that makes us capable of defending ourselves. We let them inspect our homes, our facilities, our lives whenever they want? That's not living, Peter, that's just existing. Helen stood up and walked to the window. Even though they were deep underground, a screen showed the view of the sky above. She could see the stars, tiny points of light that humanity had dreamed of reaching for thousands of years. I became president to make life better for everyone on this planet, to unite humanity and help us reach our potential. I never imagined I'd be making a decision like this. She turned back to face the room. But Jake is right. We can't accept the council's terms. Maybe we're being stupid. Maybe we're being arrogant. But humans have never bowed to bullies, and we're not starting now. Dr. Richardson, you have unlimited funding and authority. Build us the tools we need. General Webb, start planning our military strategy. Work with Jake and Lisa. Chris, find those weaknesses in their systems. Peter, you're going to have the hardest job of all. What's that? Peter asked. You need to keep them talking. Ask questions. Request clarifications. Make them think we're seriously considering compliance. Buy us as much time as possible. Can you do that? Peter thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. I can do that. I won't enjoy it, but I can do it. Good. As of this moment, Earth is on a war footing, but this has to stay secret. If the Council suspects we're preparing to fight, they might attack before we're ready, so we maintain the appearance of cooperation while we build our strength. Over the following months, Earth transformed. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Cities continued their daily routines. People went to work, children went to school, and life appeared to go on as it always had. But beneath the surface, a massive effort was underway. Amy's research teams worked around the clock in hidden facilities. They took apart every piece of alien technology they had ever recovered and figured out how it worked. They ran simulations and experiments. They failed hundreds of times and succeeded just often enough to keep going. Slowly, they started to understand the principles behind Council technology. Marcus began restructuring Earth's military forces. New training programs focused on unconventional warfare. Soldiers learned to think like insurgents rather than regular troops. Officers studied historical examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones. The American Revolution, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and dozens of others. The lessons were clear. Never fight the enemy's battle, always fight your own. Lisa oversaw the construction of new ships in secret. Massive facilities were built on the far side of the moon, hidden from Earth and from any Council observers who might be watching. Other shipyards were established on Mars, disguised as mining operations. Still others were hidden in the asteroid belt and among the moons of Jupiter. Each location built ships using new designs that incorporated both human innovation and adapted alien technology. Chris worked on what he called the Skeleton Key Project. He spent months analyzing Council communications and data structures. He discovered that all of their technology was built on a foundation created millions of years ago by some long-dead civilization. The Council had inherited this technology and built on top of it, but they had never fully understood it. Hidden in the ancient code were backdoors and override protocols. Chris couldn't control Council ships, but he found ways to disrupt them, to interfere with their coordination, to create chaos in their systems. And Peter talked. He sent messages to the Council asking for detailed explanations of their requirements. He requested guidance on how to properly dismantle nuclear facilities. He asked about inspection procedures and timelines. He made lists of questions and sent them in carefully timed intervals. To the Council, it looked like Earth was taking the ultimatum seriously and working toward compliance. In reality, every question was designed to buy more time and gather more information. Years passed. 3 years, then 4. Earth's secret fleet grew to over 100 ships, all hidden in places the Council would never think to look. Amy's teams made breakthrough after breakthrough. They developed shields that could withstand Council weapons at least for a while. They created new types of weapons designed specifically to exploit the weaknesses Lisa had identified in Council technology. They built engines that could match Council ships for speed and maneuverability. The stars had never seemed so cold. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the ESS Defiance, watching the viewing screen with growing unease. 6 months ago, Earth had received its first message from beyond the solar system. The transmission had been clear and simple. Come to these coordinates and meet the Galactic Council. Humanity had celebrated for weeks. They were not alone in the universe. Finally, after centuries of wondering, they had proof that other intelligent life existed. Now, as the Defiance approached the massive structure floating in deep space, Jake wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. The station was enormous, bigger than any city on Earth. Ships of strange designs orbited around it, some sleek and elegant, others bulky and industrial. Every one of them was larger than the Defiance. Commander Lisa Harper checked her instruments for the 10th time in as many minutes. Her hands moved across the controls with nervous energy. Captain, I'm reading power signatures that don't make sense. Some of these ships could vaporize us without breaking a sweat. Jake nodded but kept his expression calm. The crew was already anxious enough. Let's hope they're friendly. Keep weapons on standby, but don't power them up. We're here as guests, not invaders. Behind them, Ambassador Peter Grant adjusted his suit one more time. He was a tall man with gray hair and a calm demeanor that had served him well in countless negotiations on Earth. But this was different. This wasn't negotiating trade deals or peace treaties with other humans. This was first contact with aliens who had technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. How do I look? Peter asked, trying to lighten the mood. Like a man about to make history, Lisa replied with a slight smile. The communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect English, though it had an odd musical quality that suggested it was being translated by a machine. Human vessel, you are cleared to dock at Port 7. A delegation will escort you to the council chambers. Jake guided the ship into the docking port with careful precision. As the airlock sealed and pressurized, he took a deep breath. Well, here we go. Peter, you're up. The delegation consisted of Peter, Jake, Lisa, and 2 security officers named Carl Davis and Nina White. They wore their best uniforms, freshly pressed and adorned with the flag of United Earth. As the airlock opened, they stepped into a corridor that seemed to stretch forever in both directions. Waiting for them was their escort, a being that looked like it was made of liquid silver. It had no visible face, but somehow they could tell it was watching them. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Follow me, humans. The council is waiting. They walked through corridors filled with beings from dozens of different species. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien that it hurt to look at them directly. A few stopped to stare at the human delegation with what might have been curiosity or contempt. It was impossible to tell. The council chambers were breathtaking. The room was shaped like a massive amphitheater, with seats rising in tiers all around a central platform. Hundreds of beings filled those seats, representing what must have been every major species in the galaxy. At the very center, on a raised platform that seemed to glow with its own light, sat the High Arbiter. Bexathora was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Its body appeared to be made of living crystal that constantly shifted colors. It was at least 3 meters tall, and its presence filled the entire chamber. When it moved, light refracted through its crystalline form, creating patterns that danced across the walls. Humans of Earth. Bexathora's voice boomed through the chamber, requiring no translation device. You stand before the Galactic Council, the governing body of civilized space. We have observed your species for many years. We know of your history, your wars, your violence, and your primitive nature. Peter stepped forward, his diplomatic training keeping his voice steady. Honored Arbiter, we come in peace. Humanity wishes only to join the galactic community and learn from our fellow beings. A sound rippled through the chamber. It took the humans a moment to realize it was laughter. Not friendly laughter, but the kind of laughter that comes when someone hears something ridiculous. Bexathora's crystalline form pulsed with bright light. Join as equals? You misunderstand your position, human. You have not been invited to join the council. You have been summoned to receive judgment. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. Judgment for what? We've never even left our solar system until recently. We haven't committed any crimes against the galaxy. Your crime is your nature, another council member spoke up. This one looked like a floating jellyfish with too many tentacles. You wage war against your own kind. You possess weapons capable of destroying your entire planet. You consume resources at an unsustainable rate. In short, you are dangerous. Lisa's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm, but Jake caught her eye and shook his head slightly. Starting a fight here would only prove the council's point. Bexathora continued, and its voice had the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. The council has reached its decision after careful consideration. Humanity will be restricted to your solar system. You are forbidden from traveling beyond it. Any ship that attempts to leave will be destroyed without warning. Furthermore, you will dismantle all nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction. Council inspectors will visit Earth regularly to ensure compliance. That's insane, Carl blurted out before he could stop himself. You can't just imprison an entire species in their own star system. We can, and we have done so before, Bexathora replied coldly. You have 10 of your Earth years to comply with these terms. Failure to do so will result in more severe measures. Peter's diplomatic mask finally cracked. More severe? What could be more severe than what you're already proposing? The High Arbiter leaned forward, and its crystalline body seemed to grow darker. Orbital bombardment of your population centers. Destruction of your industrial capacity. If necessary, complete sterilization of your planet. We have done this 3 times in Council history when species proved too dangerous to contain. Do not force us to make it 4. The chamber fell silent. The threat hung in the air like a physical weight. Jake looked around at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at them. Some seemed satisfied with the judgment. Others looked bored, as if this was just routine business. None showed any sympathy. You can't do this, Jake said quietly. We're a sentient species. We have rights. Rights are privileges granted by the Council to civilized beings. Vex Thora replied. You have not earned such privileges. Perhaps in a few thousand years, if you survive and evolve beyond your violent nature, we will revisit this decision. Until then, you will obey or you will be eliminated. These are your only options. The silver escort appeared beside them. The audience has concluded. You will return to your ship and depart immediately. The walk back to the Defiance felt like a funeral march. None of the humans spoke until they were safely aboard their ship, and the airlock had sealed behind them. Even then, they sat in silence for long moments, trying to process what had just happened. Finally, Lisa spoke, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. They're going to cage us like animals. Everything we've worked for, everything we've dreamed about exploring the stars, it's all gone. Peter slumped in a chair, looking older than he had just hours before. We came here hoping to make friends. Instead, we found jailers. Jake stared at the Council station on the viewing screen as the Defiance pulled away. His mind was racing, thinking through implications and possibilities. Set course for Earth, he ordered. Maximum speed. The President needs to hear about this immediately. As the stars stretched into lines and the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake made a decision. The Council thought humanity would simply accept this judgment. They thought humans would be so terrified of their superior technology that they would submit without question. But the Council had made a mistake. They had studied human history and seen only war and violence. They had missed the most important part of what made humans human. Throughout their entire history, whenever someone tried to put them in chains, humans had always fought back. The question wasn't whether humanity would accept the Council's terms. The question was how they would resist. And as Earth came into view 3 weeks later, Jake knew that question was about to be answered.